Serbia, Kosovo, and whatnot.
Okay, so you're going to see a strange constellation of events happening at the same time. So there's pressure right now being applied. The European meetings coming up regarding Serbia and Kosovo, top of the agenda, and the U.S. is on a full court press for PR on this. So this is the U.S. envoy here, U.S. ambassador to Kosovo, Jeffrey Hovenier, and he's saying that Kosovo, he's basically saying the EU's planning for normalization of relations with Serbia, and he's calling it a significant step. So this is what's coming out of Washington. They're pushing it really hard. They're placing a lot of pressure on the government in Serbia to sort of come to the table and recognize Kosovo as a state. This has always been the problem here. And so this has created a little bit of a backlash in Serbia itself, and so more conservative or right-wing groups are now putting a lot of pressure on President Vučić here to make sure that this is not going to happen. So Serbian leader now says he won't sign anything during the Kosovo talks. He's clarified his position on this. He's basically saying, nope, it's not going to happen. Let's look at the actual statement here from President Alexander Vučić. When someone signs something, I will be the one to sign it, he says, and the people will decide on that, says Vučić. As for signing something in Ohrid, I'm not planning on everything. He's talking about the EU meeting here. So he's basically saying, I'll go, we'll talk, we'll have negotiations, but we're not going to sign any declaration or anything like that there. Why is this important? Why is the timing of this so crucial? And why is it important for Europe and the United States to make something happen here? And think about it. So who is Serbia's, who's their brother's keeper? Their greatest ally is Moscow, geopolitically. And so, but this is a big problem. The establishment of Kosovo as a sort of NATO protectorate in the middle of Europe, not recognized by all its neighbors, not getting official statehood because of the way in which Yugoslavia was dismembered by NATO, that's going to create a sort of veil of hypocrisy over Western calls to return Crimea back to Ukraine, for instance. This is always going to be a sticking point. So is it possible behind the scenes we have potentially a quid pro quo situation? If Russia and Serbia recognize Kosovo, then we'll recognize Crimea, and at least that sort of problem has been canceled out on both sides, and they can move on to other issues. If you think that the West is desperate to find an exit strategy for the debacle that is the Ukraine proxy war right now. That's what I think is possibly happening here, but we're not sure. But let's take a look at this. This is what Tony Blinken's saying. This was from back in this last spring. And the position, as far as I know, has not changed officially. The U.S. will not consider recognizing Crimea as part of the Russian Federation. So, I mean, that's the card that the United States has been holding throughout this whole conflict, and even before this as well. So you can see how these two things are reciprocal. They're absolutely reciprocal. Now here, and why is this important? This brings us to another problem of international law. And so this, you reported on this, didn't you?
Yes.
Last week. So an incredible coalition here. What kind of coalition? A bipartisan coalition attempting to pull U.S. troops out of Syria. So this is AOC and the squad, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who the left regard as QAnon. So you've got the squad and what the Democrats call QAnon, teaming up with Matt Gaetz, who's a conservative Republican here, and Jim Jordan. And so this is an incredible coalition. Now, they didn't get the vote, but the fact that they're going for this, I think, is significant. We have never seen this before in U.S. politics. Why would why would some people in the U.S. think it's a good idea to get out of Syria and quick because of this issue of territorial sovereignty and invoking United Nations Charter and Article 51? The United States is in violation of that as we speak. As Vanessa said as well, Turkey is in violation of that. They're occupying Syrian sovereign territory. So you have these two transgressions against Syria happening as we speak, and the entire, quote, international community is basically wanting to drag Russia into a new international war crimes tribunal for the crime of aggression or violating the sanctity, the territorial integrity of the sovereign state of Ukraine, etc. As we've argued before, the territorial integrity issue in international law is only one side of the issue. The other side is self-determination, and that is also outlined in the UN Charter as well. And the Donbass republics have gone through all of the steps required in order to achieve autonomy and to declare at least themselves and recognized by some of their neighbors as statehood. So in a way, they have a stronger case than Kosovo in terms of how they came to be in terms of that civil war. But Americans might argue that it's the same case. It's the same exact case. So let's look at this here. So this is the EU, but they're planning this massive tribunal. They're calling it a tribunal like no other, prosecuting Russia's crimes of aggression in Ukraine. So they're trying to put this special tribunal together. It's inherently problematic. And who is it problematic? Mainly to the United States. Because then the question is going to come up, when does the statute of limitations when does the statute of limitations end on this? Because the United States, we have a whole litany of violations and crimes of aggression that go all the way back. Even if you want to count the carpet bombing of Raqqa and Mosul by the U.S. Air Force and the U.S. Navy in their fight against ISIS. You know, there's all sorts of things, not just the things that we mentioned, but there's a whole, from Iraq to Libya, Afghanistan. So anyway, this is a problem here. So here's Lloyd Austin, and look at this. Ooh, they backed off, didn't they, this week? Look at that. The Pentagon is blocking the U.S. from sharing evidence on Russian atrocities in Ukraine with the International Criminal Court, the ICC. Military leaders fear in the Pentagon that setting a precedent that might pave the way for the prosecution of Americans. The United States is not a signatory to the International Criminal Court, so neither is Russia. Russia maintains their positions. We're not a party. They have no jurisdiction over us or anything that we do. It's pretty much the same position that the United States has. The United States initially joined it back when it formed, but then they pulled out. So the U.S. and Russia are in pretty much the same position here. So you can see they're really worried. Washington does not want to open this Pandora's box. And for good reason, because it would be an absolute mess and a quagmire legally. So, and this is a great, this is a pretty fair, even-handed piece, surprisingly, by the Washington Post. The United States and the ICC have an awkward history. And so I think this is important to get a background on this. But the war in Ukraine could prove to be a chance, according to some Americans, to reimagine the U.S. relationship with the International Criminal Court. Last year, a group of lawmakers led by Lindsey Graham, of all people, Republicans tend to eschew the ICC, passed a new law that allowed for more scope and cooperation with the court. And Graham praising, look at this, with Graham praising Putin for rehabilitating the ICC in the eyes of the Republican Party and the American people. That's a tongue-in-cheek comment there. It's basically saying, thanks for invading Ukraine because it's a chance to reinvigorate the ICC. So during his trip to The Hague. So that's Graham. And here's another final blow, Mike, to this whole thing. The genocide charges. The UN Commission fails to find evidence of Russia's, quote, genocide in Ukraine. That's problematic, okay? Because they were hoping that was going to be the big sort of marquee point that they would build a lot of this tribunal around. And it looks like, as we said before in this program, it looks like there's no beef on that burger. If you can't, and the Bucha thing is interesting because you're not hearing as much about Bucha and the maternity ward in Mariupol because a lot of people are seeing this for what it truly is, which were sensational media stunts. But just look at this. This is a really important point by the former ambassador to the United States. This is Prince Turki bin Faisal. And he said, aggression is aggression, whether it's committed by Russia or Israel. This was an earlier interview he did a few months ago. And yet there has been no such effort to sanction Israel. So Saudis are willing to pull Israel into this conversation. And he's basically saying that the sanctions were placed on Russia, but they haven't been, and Israel's invaded and destroyed Arab countries for years. There's a total double standard here. And that the stealing of Palestinian land by Israel continues despite assurances that Israel gave to the signatories of the peace accords, including the Abraham Accords, which we mentioned, between the UAE and Israel. So that's interesting. That's bin Faisal there. So the Palestinian people are still occupied. They are being imprisoned willy-nilly by the Israeli government, attacked. Assassinations of Palestinian individuals take place almost on a daily basis. So they're ready to do that, Mike. They're ready to pull that card. And that really throws things into turmoil in terms of building a narrative that the West is so desperate to do. And we just have to bring out the old quote here by our old friend Marshal Zurkov. He said, "We have liberated Europe from fascism, but they will never forgive us for it."
Indeed.
A timeless classic of a quote.
Yes. Okay. Well, look, we're going to have to leave it there. So thank you very much, Patrick. Thank you, Vanessa, as well. We'll be back in a couple of minutes for some extra. Was there something you wanted to?
Oh, we went to.
Oh,
well.
Yeah. Sorry. You've just. Well, we just wanted to say have a great.
We had a graphic for St. Patrick's Day, but we duffed it up.
Yeah.
But it's St. Pat's Day, so happy St. Pat's Day, everybody.
Back in a few minutes for some extra. We'll see you then. Thanks for joining us.